everybody. Welcome to Writers in Conversation, which is one of our interviews with local authors. And today we have Katy Massey, who worked as a journalist for many years and also worked on Arts Council funded anthologies to enable writers from diverse communities to develop and publish their work. She's been involved in two works, Tangled Roots, True Life Stories about Mixed Race Britain, and Who Are We Now, a collection of true stories about Brexit and how the results of the referendum affected people's lives. We're coming to you today, unfortunately, not from a library, as we are still in lockdown. And we're hoping, obviously, that we will be able to do some more of our interviews in libraries, but we are coming to you remotely today. So Katy has also written her own life story, Are We Home Yet?, about growing up as a mixed race child in Leeds in the 70s and 80s, which we're going to be talking about today. Katy's writing has been described by novelist Sharon Dougal as unflinchingly honest and undeniably authentic. Are We Home Yet is funny, sharp and wise. So yes, Katy, I gather that you wrote your story, Are We Home Yet?, as part of a project for your PhD in creative writing, and you actually wrote it about 10 years ago, but it has only been recently published by Jacaranda Press. So can you tell us how that happened, and was there a long delay for any particular reason, and how did it happen to be published now?
Yes, it's a bit of a long story. I was a journalist and I was starting to burn out of that, and I went back to university to do an MA, and while I was doing that I kind of got the bug for studying and that form of writing, actually, which I love. And the PhD that I chose to do was at Newcastle, and it was in memoir and autobiography, and half of it was a critical work and half of it was my memoir. But then I graduated that and I started to do, I wanted to work with other people, but the findings of my PhD was that very, very few people from the margins of society, by which I mean anybody that may be not straight or not white, or not a man, get their life stories out there. There's a very sort of well trodden path to having your life recorded, and the projects that I worked on or that I conceived took me a long time. Funding took a long time, and then developing 30 writers to the point where they could be anthologized. I think it happens in a culture that sometimes a moment happens. And it has just been the moment for memoir, and it's a very rare thing that memoir can be accepted in and of itself, that people are genuinely interested in real life stories. Have you got a copy of the book to hand, actually?
I have, yes.
Yeah.
Can you hit here?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I was just looking for it because just that cover, I've never seen a cover like that, and it took some toing and froing, but that's quite the book industry on the whole, like representing people of different races together on a book cover. Yeah, and it will be, now I've said that, you might walk around noticing, there's a lot of Kenty prints and jacaranda trees in that section, but this is it comes from looking at the world in a slightly different way, I think, and I've never known a moment like now for stories like ours.
And you, I believe you write, you teach writing memoir as well.
Yeah, I've done quite a lot of it, because all of the projects that I've conceived and raised the funding for and then run them have involved some writing development in them. Because again, when people think of writing, they tend not to think of memoir, creative non-fiction. Non-fiction itself, actually, the first-time writer will always do a poetry class and a fiction class, and more than 50% of book sales are non-fiction. So I find that when I've taught it for New Writing South and Spread the Word, as well as on my own project, and I've done the classes on festivals, and they always do well because the subject matter is so accessible. It's your own experience.
Yeah.
What's missing is any sort of guidance into how can I form this. So yeah, they always do well, and I love them because for me, I always get to hear great stories. So I'm very fortunate. The last one just finished in December. I did via Zoom, my first set of classes via Zoom actually, for New Writing South, and it was a joy. It was like a night out. It was locked down, and once a week I got to connect with 12 incredibly interesting people and incredibly diverse. You don't have to ask for a memoir class to be diverse. They just always are, because the people who think, actually, I haven't seen my story anywhere, or I've seen it and it's deeply misunderstood. So those two sort of strands always seem to turn up, and it makes it really rewarding.
So well, let's talk a little bit about Are We Home Yet? Now, the story, I mean, it kind of moves around quite a lot between different time periods in your life, and different sort of familial relationships and things. Could you tell us just a little bit about the characters in your family that you grew up with, that you were living with at the time?
Yeah, of course. There was my mum, who's really the main character of the book, and really the book is about my relationship with her. And then there was my two older white brothers from her first marriage, who were 9 and 13 years older than me. So I wasn't born until she was in her late 30s, about 38. By which time the first family, the first children were sort of on the way to being grown up. So we had quite an intense relationship, really. And I was the only mixed race child in a white family. My father's in it a bit, but not very much, because I don't remember him very well. And then he died when I was quite young.
Yes, I was going to mention to you about your father, because he wasn't really a part of your life at all, was he? Which was your mother's choice, I gathered.
Well, that's what she always told me. I think I indicate, hopefully, obviously enough, that my mother really never let facts stand in the way of a good story. So he exists as a sort of an imaginary character, really. He exists in the imagination of a place where a father would be.
Interestingly, your parents met through, they were pen pals, weren't they?
Through the Jehovah's Witnesses. So my mum was a Jehovah's Witness from being quite young, so I think her late 20s, and then sort of abandoned the church in middle age or early middle age, and then went back to the church in old age. So again, I sort of missed out on the internet. So we were Jehovah's Witnesses when I was very, very young and didn't celebrate birthdays or Christmas or anything, which seemed very harsh. And then I think I was about 7 or 8 when she started to drift away from it. Almost at the same time, although I don't say this, but I hopefully indicate it in terms of structure, when she took up her new career, which is where the book opens.
Yes, her new career, it doesn't kind of tally with, having a sort of a religious upbringing or a religious stance, really.
No.
Was that why perhaps you think she drifted away?
I think definitely. We should say to the reader that the book opens with me finding out or realising that my mum is a sex worker. I don't remember having a great moral problem with my mum's job, and I still don't, actually, because I wasn't really old enough to have those sort of judgments. But it had to be a secret. It was a different time, and people were incredibly judgmental, and it was a time when women had much more defined roles.
I was going to talk to you a bit about, your mum was obviously a good businesswoman, because she was a secretary, wasn't she? Back in the day.
She had a lot of her own businesses in the 60s. She'd gone back to being a secretary when as me, I think, actually. I think I was responsible for that. But she'd had a marriage bureau and a cafe and all sorts of things. Yeah, so she was Thatcherite, actually. She was the small person who sees no barrier to becoming uh, uh, not rich. I don't think rich, but independent, self-reliant.
So when she opened her massage parlour, Aristotle's, I believe that you spent quite a bit of your sort of school holidays, or when you weren't at boarding school, you you were there sort of chatting to the girls. That must have been interesting.
It was an eye opener, because you have a notion of things, but I was too young to have stereotypes in the head. So what I had was just these nice women who were bored a lot of the time, quite boring, to be open 12 hours a day, 7 days a week.
You said something very interesting. Well, lots of very interesting things, but this particular thing was you said it was about sort of being the only mixed race or BAME person throughout your life in lots of situations that you were in. And you said that the etiquette, which I thought was a really interesting word to use as well, for encountering racial abuse is to endure, which sounds really, really sad. I mean, have you found that throughout your life? How is it improving at all, or?
Now this is difficult, because ideally one would challenge it, but it's in very few situations which it is possible to challenge it. So it's something that occurs to you in situations where either bad manners, very difficult, or the other people around you wouldn't thank you for challenging it. And I would suggest that actually people who are seeking to be offensive and racist know that. I mean, I don't think that's by coincidence. So I would say it was I would say that that's mostly still the case. I'm more confident at challenging it, but even so, I find that as I grow older, I notice more insidious instances. And as society comes more tolerant, largely more tolerant, the intolerant sections of it are louder, and like to claim victimhood, for instance. So it becomes more difficult then to say, actually, what you're doing is harming me and people like me. What's at question is whether people of colour can be believed have the authority over their own experiences. That's what's the question, and that's what becomes so corrosive, because it takes away our authority over our own life experience. And it's the reason why I studied memoir and literature, because we really don't have the ability to author our own experiences largely. Even to this lack of authority, also kicked in around motherhood. So if I say to a mother, have you found this? What? Mothers don't say that. I found that oddly that, it's difficult to author your own experience of motherhood. Such is societal pressure for motherhood to be a certain way, and for childhood to be a certain way. And that, and those books that repeat and repeat and repeat the same tropes about motherhood, they're called mummy books. I find it, but it affects the things that I'm talking about affect women and people of colour, don't they? And we're not talking about things that affect middle class white men. I mean, there's a real strong pressure to conform as a mother. But there's a huge pressure on people of colour to not complain about other people perhaps not being as nice as folk might want to believe they are. It's hard.
It is, and something that I really realised from being a mother myself was that, of course, everybody's different. So every mother is different, and every mother has different ideas, about bringing up their child. And, there just isn't a one size fits all. But as you say, there is pressure to conform to these certain ideals. And also, you've always had that strong female role figure,
Yeah,
role model in your life, because
yeah,
obviously you didn't have a father figure around a lot of
yeah,
the time. And although you were at boarding school,
yeah,
your mother was still kind of probably the most influential person in
yeah, yeah,
your life.
definitely.
And so do you feel that your relationship with your daughter, which you mentioned earlier, is, you've got a strong relationship? Do you find it very different to the relationship that you had with your mother?
I want to say I hope so. She's only 8, so we've got quite a lot of time to go. I didn't go to boarding school until I was 12, so I was already far more formed than she is. Yeah, I hope so. I think it is actually. I think it is. I think me and my mum are quite different people. So. So I hope that even though the subjects we've talked about are grim, there is quite a lot of humour in the book. There is this, like, my mum's cooking. When I was depressed and I went to stay with her, she just cooked and cooked and cooked. And I remember writing that and laughing, like remembering her making chops and all of this stuff. Like, she loved cooking, she loved feeding her kids, And it was that writing this kind of material, this difficult material, is in a lot of respects, it can be its own reward, because you do, in revisiting these times, you can have the best adventure. It really is very interesting to sort of think about now. How did I become the person I am today? If not, I might self-indulgence, but there you are. I can see I might share that with Yvette. I might share that with you.
Oh dear. But yes, I mean, food obviously is quite important part of everyone's life. And I mean, I'm not a cook myself, but I certainly do like eating, and there is that role, isn't there, that food plays as a sort of a way of showing affection and
Yes, yes.
comfort, as well as obviously physical nutrition.
I did want to say before we finished as well how important libraries were to me. Not so much when I went to school, when I went away from school, but nobody in my house was bookish. And when I was very young, I was bookish. And if you are that child, not that they didn't, I mean, it wasn't like anybody hated books. They didn't burn them if I brought them in. It's just that we didn't have many books in the house. And also, they weren't seen as something that you kept around. So if my mum read a book, she would then either pass it on to somebody else or give it to the charity shop, and it would be replaced by another book. But shelves of books weren't something you had around. So libraries became really quite young. I was swapping the library books every week, and we lived near a library with Greenleaf. So yeah, no, I've been really honoured to talk to library services. Thank you.
Well, I was just going to ask you, and thank you so much for mentioning libraries. I was just going to ask you, what's next? What can we expect to hear from you next? What are you writing, or?
I am writing. I've got a book that's a year late. Thank you, COVID. If they could just get the schools open, I keep telling my agent. I'm writing a book that's set in Leeds in the 70s. It's set a bit before my time, and it's around the time of the Ripper killings, although he's not a big part of the book. And it's about a woman who keeps a brothel called Rio's, and she's called Maureen. I can't imagine what the inspiration for this is. And so she has a particular friend on the police force who she starts helping, basically because she has access to worlds and to environments that, by virtue of her job and her colour, she's mixed race, that the police, particularly at the time, don't have. So it's been great to write. Actually, it's been lovely. I can hear my accent getting thicker as I tell you about it, because it's written in quite a northern voice. But it's been an opportunity to explore times that were just before I come in the picture, just before I remember, that were harder. You see, the 3-day week, if that's the sort of period I'm looking at. So it's an interesting 3-day week with electricity being turned off, all of that stuff. So it's an interesting period. I'm enjoying it a lot, and yeah, we'll see. I hope.
Sadly, I do remember that 3-day week, the
Yeah.
power cuts and things
Yeah.
a bit myself.
Yeah, I only just remember it. I remember having candles, which seemed like the most exciting thing in the world.
Yeah.
And my mother being certain that we were going to burn the house down. So having candles everywhere and having kids running about. So I think, yes, it's nice to sort of write that, but from an adult point of view. But I think, you know, yeah, again, what am I doing? I'm putting myself into her shoes, aren't I? And some people will, I think she'll always remain a sort of enigmatic figure to me. I think that's true. And I think that Are We Home Yet is a way of, sorry, I've got the book here now, I'm just looking at it. I think Are We Home Yet is a way of sort of getting to know her in a strange way. And it's the same reason why on the cover she's looking away from the reader. Those figures are looking elsewhere.
Yes, you've both got your backs to the reader,
yeah,
actually,
it's
haven't
very
you?
unusual. I mean, I love it, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if anything else does. I just think it reminds me a little bit of in its fairness and its starkness of those you know, like the 1970s textbooks, play for today type graphics, those very big flames. And it reminds me a little bit of those, so I enjoy it for that reason as well. But no, having it back to the reader is an interesting marketing tool, isn't it?
Well, so we should say, of course, that Are We Home Yet can be purchased online, I'm sure, from any good retailer.
It can.
And I'm hoping, obviously, that well, when the library's open, you will be able to borrow it from us as well.
Oh well, so do I. Yes.
So yeah, so it's been lovely speaking to you, Katy, and you know, really interesting to hear more about your life and the book. And I should be definitely looking out for your next book. So yeah, well, thank you very much for agreeing to do this and, you know, spending your time chatting to me. And we'll have to stay in touch and see what you're up to next.
Oh, thanks very much, Julie. Thank you for you know, taking an interest, especially at such a difficult time. It's been a strange thing to bring a book out at this time because I haven't actually met people in person that have read the book. So this is the closest I get. So thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking about it, actually. It's been really enjoyable.
Brilliant. Well, me too. And yeah, well, thank you so much.
Not at all.